If you enjoy my videos, then please like, subscribe, and share. It's the only way my little channel can grow. Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbard. Whoa. Wait, are you telling me that I've done 13 episodes of utterly pointless comparisons already, somehow without managing to do the arcade versus Genesis versions of Golden Axe?
What's wrong with you?
Well, I think it's about time that I remedy that. I'll begin by putting up a spec comparison of the arcade and Genesis hardware while I tell you a little bit about the game itself. Golden Axe was released on Sega's System 16 hardware in the magical year of the beat-em-up known as 1989, which saw a few other notable entries in the genre, such as Capcom's Final Fight. Arcade Golden Axe came out just a few short months after Sega had released the Mega Drive hardware in Japan, and a few short months before it had released the Genesis hardware in America. It seemed like a no-brainer for Sega to port this game to their newfangled 16-bit home system. And it was. So they did, 6 months after the arcade game came out. In the arcade version of Golden Axe, you get 5 levels, 2-player simultaneous play, a bunch of death screams that were completely stolen from famous movies of the day, and magical effects that use some fancy hardware scaling and things like that, as well as the ability to see your best friend get killed right in front of your face at the very beginning of the game. Whoa, bummer. Now I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of front-loaded comparison notes here. I'll just tell you about the differences during the commentary while the videos are up and running side by side. What I will say up front here is that Sega did do a fantastic job of bringing this game home to the Genesis just a few short months after the arcade version had been released. Yeah, it has a lot of cutbacks, particularly in frames of animation and background detail, but that was completely to be expected because they had to use a small, tiny, itsy-bitsy 512 kilobyte cartridge. Despite this, the game really does resemble the arcade version both visually and orally very well. One thing I've done a little bit differently this time around is I've also squeezed in some footage of the Sega Master System version of Golden Axe. You won't see this until you get towards the end of the comparison video, since I showed it during the final level of the Genesis version, which has no equivalent in the arcade version of the game. As far as recording methodology goes this time around, really nothing to say. I just played the two games straight through. Not my best playthroughs ever, but who cares about that? Go ahead and watch my comparison now. Right from the start, you see your friend Alex gets killed in front of you in the arcade version of Golden Axe. In the Genesis version, we get some thoughtful exposition on the subject. Yeah, that's super effective. Hey, they took the parallax scrolling layer out of the background. Jerks. Look at that. When you kill enemies in the arcade game, they discolor and stay on the ground. That's gone in the Genesis port. There's also a larger variety of stolen screams in the arcade original. You'll also notice the colors are pretty reduced in the backgrounds on the Genesis version of the game. At least the characters look pretty good, even though they're also color reduced. There are far fewer variations in the background tiles in the Genesis version, so we lose details on things like grass, dry cracked earth, vines, and the like. This is most likely mainly due to the cartridge size of a paltry 512 kilobytes, or 4 megabits in the parlance of the day. I should also point out that the Genesis version has a bit of a different feel from the arcade game when it comes to control. Character movement is sort of smoother in the Genesis game. The arcade has a weird sort of momentum, especially when moving vertically, that's absent from the Genesis port. Yeah, here's the first bosses. As you can see, the Earth Magic effect looks much fancier with its hardware scaling in the arcade version. Here you can also really see the lack of variety and detail on the floor and background in the Genesis port compared to the arcade original. Level 2, and we have a few things to look at here. First, they cut out the first screen or so of the level in the Genesis version of the game. We also lose the running, panicking villagers, but a few of them will show up a bit later in that version. Next up, if you look at the arcade original, you can see the edge of the ground is actually the edge of a turtle shell. On the Genesis, you can't see that at all. And if you look a little bit closer at the arcade version, you can even see the fin, and it's obvious that you're on the back of a turtle. There also isn't as much background detail or as many villagers, either in variety or quantity, on the Genesis. The arcade game drives home the fact that you're on the back of a giant swimming turtle by having the whole screen bob up and down, including the water at the bottom. On the Genesis, they took out the screen bobbing effect and just have a little bit of water at the bottom of the screen moving up and down instead. Why, Sega? Alright, boss time. Oh, it's just a skeleton and some normal enemies. Hey. They f***ed up and put the red dragon here on the Genesis version instead of in level 3 where it belongs. Why, Sega? As we begin level 3, we see that the beginning area of the level is once again completely removed. They also replaced the red dragon with a blue one. Lame. The bridge is, well, a lot shorter on the Genesis version for some reason. Hey, look, they took the pub sign out of the Genesis game, because pubs are the devil's house. Also, the night is a little bit slower on the Genesis compared to the arcade game. Level 4. My least favorite level in the entire game. Probably because of the annoying music. Oh yeah, also, you'll notice once again that the beginning of the level has been cut out of the Genesis version. Now this level, aside from some color palette differences, is actually pretty close. Oh, and fun little gameplay difference here. On the Genesis, if you can get below the enemies and slowly swing your weapon at them, you can set them up where you can easily just keep hitting them until they die without them ever falling over before that happens. You can't do that in the arcade game. Now you'll see coming up here that we have feathers kind of swarming the screen at the beginning, and that is in both versions of the game. What's missing is in the arcade one they turn into clouds a little bit later towards the end of the level. The Genesis version only gets the feathers. Here we are at the boss of the 4th level, and this time the boss is a skeleton, and a skeleton, and a skeleton, and some dark versions of regular enemies. Amazing. Here we have level 5, the final level of the arcade original. You'll notice that we lose just a little tiny bit at the beginning on the Genesis version this time around. Man, why did they have to screw up the eagle's eye so badly? What, your background palette didn't have room for white and blue? Also, you'll notice in the arcade version the eye moves, but it doesn't in the Genesis one. Eagle-eyed viewers, haha, will also notice that the turtle's eye moved in stage 3. Hey, no drawbridge chain on the Genesis, jerks. Hey, you stole my dragon by having this transition to a new scene on the Genesis version. Jerks. Hey, Death Adder isn't forming from snakes slowly making their way to the top of the screen on the Genesis. Jerks. And when you beat Death Adder in the arcade game, here you get a lovely little blood spray. From here, you save the princess and king and you get the ending. But now is the Genesis's time to shine, with its extra exclusive brand new level. You know, I wrote a whole section of script just for this level on the Genesis version, but really, all you do is either watch enemies walk into pits or knock them into pits yourself. So while we're doing this and fighting the final boss on the Genesis version, how about we take a look at the Sega Master System game? Golden Axe for the Sega Master System came out right around the same time as the Genesis version, and I can remember back in the day a certain magazine, EGM, actually gave the Sega Master System version of Golden Axe a higher review score than the Genesis version of the game. Now, this was clearly insane, and the only possible theory I've come up with is that everyone who reviewed Golden Axe for EGM at that time was on drugs. Because you can see the Master System version of the game is really choppy, it's very sluggish to control, you only have one of the 3 characters playable, you lose the 2-player simultaneous play, and really, it's just, you know, it's okay, it's not a bad game, but it's definitely not great, and there are some weird liberties that they took here and there with some of the stage design, but it actually includes the complete stages, unlike the Genesis version. And you can see the characters are very large for an 8-bit brawler like this, and that's partially because of the way they basically use tiles for most things instead of sprites. The trade-off with that is that you have very, very choppy movement as everything moves around the screen. And even the screen itself scrolls a full tile at a time. Now in still shots, I mean the Sega Master System version really looked pretty impressive, Still, once you see it in motion and you get your hands on the control, the overall sluggishness and delay of everything really kind of hurts the experience. One other oddity is they reversed the songs in levels 3 and 4 for some reason. And before anyone says anything, no, this isn't an emulation problem. I have the cartridge and it does the same thing. I guess on the flip side of that, it actually makes level 4 a little bit more fun to play through because you don't have to listen to that awful music. Here on the Genesis, we are now coming up to Deathbringer. Why we have Deathbringer now is a complete mystery, other than they wanted to give the game a new final boss. Basically, he's just Death Adder and he has a couple of more magical attacks. He also is a lot harder to kill, and he's not even that much harder to kill, it's really more that he takes longer to kill. And these two skeletons with him, you can actually kill them if you want to put in the time and effort, but they have so much health it's really not worth it. Instead, I would just recommend fighting Deathbringer directly and trying to ignore them as best you can. Meanwhile, back on the Master System, here's its lovely section of the final level where we get to look at the eagle. Yeah, that's a little strange there, huh? Now, we don't have the big drawbridge chain in the Master System version, but they at least do have the column or pole or whatever you want to call it that runs up way past the top of the screen, so good on them for that. Now on the Master System, here we are skipping ahead to its final fight with Death Adder. Apparently Death Adder's butt is so big in the SMS version that he needs 2 chairs pushed together to serve as a throne. Those armrests must really hurt like a bitch when he sits down. Oddly enough, the colors on Death Adder on the Master System are a little bit more in line with Deathbringer on the Genesis game, rather than Death Adder from the arcade game. And while I've spliced up the Master System version, I did leave the ending completely intact, because, well, you've got to see some of the pictures they use. They may remind you of something. And you can see on the Genesis we are still plugging away on this fight that takes way too long. You may wonder why on the Master System one I kept doing the jump strikes to Death Adder, since it takes forever to kill enemies with that since it's relatively weak. The simple reason is, on the Master System version, you only get 1 continue. I had used my 1 continue, and I had 1 block of health left, and if Death Adder hits you with his giant axe swing, guess what? You're dead. So I had to play it safe to make sure that I beat the game. Now we're seeing some of that lovely ending on the Master System. You'll notice on the Genesis there was no blood spurt when the axe ended up in Deathbringer. I mean, that picture on the Master System looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? And that is it for the Master System version of the game. Now we're back to the arcade one, so we can watch its silly and hilarious ending, where a bunch of enemies pop out of the arcade machine to chase away the poor kids who were playing. The Genesis ending is completely different, and I have dramatically shortened it because it goes on forever. First we get to see a bunch of stats just showing enemy names and heights and weights. Yeah, super interesting. And then after that, we get to watch Gilius throw a big ball of letters at one of the long moans, who hits it like a baseball, and it changes into the credits of the people who made the game. Axe Battler and Tyrus Flare just sort of lounge in the background. And there you have it. That's it. As you can see, I did far better in the Genesis version of the game than any of the others. Hey, thanks for sticking around. I appreciate you. I don't really have any other comparison notes to share with you at this point, but I do have an opinion of the Genesis version that I would like to share. It's really the only criticism that I would level against that version of the game. You see, I feel like it would have been a better move back in the day if, instead of adding that sort of pointless extra level we have at the end where enemies just kind of totter on to their doom and walk off of ledges, it would have been much better to extend levels 2, 3, 4, and 5 to their full lengths to match the arcade games, and perhaps add a few more tiles so you can have some extra details on the other levels, such as making the turtle actually look like a turtle in Stage 2. And that's gonna just about do it for this video, my retro gaming friends. What's your opinion of Golden Axe? Did you love the original arcade game? Did you hate it? Are you happy with the Genesis port or ports for other systems that were released back in the day? Go ahead and share your voice with the world in the comments. With that, I will say thanks for watching, and see you later.